scholars say national dialogue critical to bring healing and unity to Ethiopia. Anna Fitzgerald denounces approaches and contents of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch report. Good evening to you all. A very warm welcome to ETV News. I am Grum Tariku. Ethiopia is actively engaged in holding national dialogue, which is believed to bring about healing and unity among Ethiopians. Talking to ETV, Ndala Nuguse, head of School of Diplomacy at Ethiopian Civil Service University, underscored that members of the commission are reliable and responsible to shoulder the daunting task. He also indicated that identity of the commissioners should not be a concern, as the decision of the national dialogue will be made by Ethiopians. Shagai Mata reports.
Ethiopians appear hopeful that the recently launched National Dialogue Initiative will help the country achieve a national consensus on issues that matter most. The new commission is expected to bring national consensus on different combative issues ranging from constitutional reform to local issues, historical grievances and others. In the beginning of this platform, some individuals are expressing their grievances over the identity of the commissioners. Talking to ETV, Ndala Nuguse, the head of the School of Diplomacy at Ethiopian Civil Service University, underscored that the identity of the commissioners should not be a concern, as the decision of the national dialogue will be made by Ethiopians.
Regarding the commissions, the commissioners can be any, as far as they are Ethiopian, because this is under Ethiopian sovereignty. No one can intervene on that. This is our internal, matter. So because of this, why, some individuals, some group focused on the identity of the commissioner? It doesn't know. They are simply their facilitator. This cannot be an issue by any means, because ultimately the decision has been made by the Ethiopian people.
Ndala also describes the legality of appointing the commissioners. The process by which the commissioners are chosen is based on scientific method.
The first legal aspect is, those commissioners were or have been selected by, the House of People representatives through scientific method. You see, again, ratified by the House, finished as far as the facilitator. So I think it is legal. We shouldn't forget that, when we are talking about, national dialogue, the very difference is, it is action-oriented. Otherwise, in our day-to-day life, we should use negotiation. After we concluded the dialogue, we expect a kind of action, like constitutional amendment, constitutional change, policy, revision. This is the issue. Otherwise, nothing is new.
Transformational leadership instructor at Civil Service University, Wagari Nagari, for his part, points out that constitution is not a biblical word. As it is ratified by people, it also needs to be amended in a way that suits to Ethiopians.
It is not the word of the Almighty, The constitution has been created by Ethiopians. It carries the voices of Ethiopians. As Ethiopians, in one way or another, have voices in it. Yes. They also have all the rights to modify, to transform, to change. What's the riddle here? It is surprising. It has been created by human beings. So we can modify, because as time goes, things change. When things change, new understanding can come up. As the new understanding emerges, there will be a need to think something, to redesign.
Ethiopians are anticipating the result of the national dialogue, as they trust that all existing challenges will be resolved in a national consensus.
Members of Defend Ethiopia Task Force in UK and Ireland held a virtual discussion with Ethiopian ambassador in the UK, Ambassador Teferi Meles, about rehabilitation and rebuilding plans in conflict-affected areas in the Amhara and Afar regions. Ambassador Tafari appreciated Ethiopians in the diaspora for extending multifaceted support for the government of Ethiopia and fellow Ethiopians during the fight to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country. The ambassador also called on the Ethiopian diaspora to protest against HR 6600 and 3199, setting aside the propaganda of anti-peace elements. Avocado productivity endeavors Ethiopia embarked upon 2 years ago have become fruitful. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed tweeted the country needs to strengthen its fruit and vegetable production capacities in the same manner it has done with wheat so as to enable self-sufficiency. Ethiopian and Eritrean demonstrators deplored the United States of America and other Western nations for pressuring Ethiopia. Protesters gathered in front of White House called on the U.S. government to respect Ethiopia's and Eritrea's sovereignty. Alula Teklemariam presents the following story.
Ethiopia is facing increasing international pressures over the war in Tigray. Many concerned Ethiopians are active enough to reflect to such discrepancies. As some members of the U.S.-American Congress who proposed H.R. 6600 are working relentlessly to get it approved in the United States Congress, Ethio-Eritrean diaspora communities appear to speak out against it. Carrying banners of English printed messages, they call upon the U.S.-America to respect Ethiopia's and Eritrea's sovereignty.
No more! No more! No more! No more!
Protesters who gathered in front of the White House said the U.S. has to show its neutrality. Many believe that H.R. 6600 and S. 3199 resolutions are designed to make the country dependent on the goodwill of others to advance its political, economic, and security interests. Besides severing the relationship between Ethiopia and America, it is to be recalled that the U.S.-America imposed restrictions on economic and security assistance to Ethiopia over the conflict.
USA! 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 Biden administration! Respect! 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 Ethiopia and Eritrea sovereignty!
Western journalists disclosed the disastrous atrocities committed by TPLF in Amhara region. Photojournalists from Getty Image, Jamal Countess, and Betty Sheba Texter from Push Start Media, staying with ETV Addis Dialogue, have shared the horrific experience they have come across. They witnessed atrocities in Afar and Amhara regions following the mass grave report in Wolqayt Zagade area by the University of Gondar last week. According to the two journalists, TPLF forces have changed the whole city of Addis Alem into a graveyard. Take a look.
Paid a visit to different parts of Ethiopia. So what are some of the areas that you paid a visit to, and what have you observed?
I started in Afar, I went to Afdera and some other sites visiting IDP populations, internally displaced people. Observed some critical issues that kind of affect all IDPs in Afar and the Amhara region, which is lack of critical resources, food, water, and medicines, and sanitation. Then after Afar, we drove straight across to Lalibela. Made a pit stop in Dese to go to the Tigeru IDP camp in a place called Tula, and then visit an Amhara IDP camp in a place called Jara. Then drove into Lalibela on the way to Sokoto. And then after that, regrouped and went over to Walkite, you know?
And then we went to Walkite when we heard about the mass grave that were being found, and there was contacts with, Jamal had contacts with the Gondar University folks who were doing the research there. We instantly traveled back there. And over there, we saw several sites, starting from Dajana, right? Dajana, where there are several of these old prison camps. They're really torture camps in caves, and they're called Bado Sittist or 06. That was the general terminology for all these prisons that were established before TPLF had taken over the government here. So starting with European calendar 85, 86 time frame through 91 until they were in power, they used these torture camps where they would take local Amharas in Walkite and would torture them and would put them in these caves.
Of all the visits that you paid, which were most shocking in your view, that will never, get out of your head?
There's one torture center at Gahanib where there's a natural rock formation that kind of comes together. It's a cleft, comes together like this. And so basically what the TPLF would do is they would take a prisoner who had his hands bound behind his back like this, and they would shove him into the crevice, forward facing, and they would beat him with a hammer or any other object to torture him to extract information. And, it reminded me of, medieval times. I mean, like some of the most brutal things you can do to a human being for, the most ridiculous reasons, or, just the most heinous acts you can imagine were done to people.
It's hard to say, this was worse, this was, but yeah, Gahanib, or Gahanna, as they started calling it, was probably one of the worst things to see. There's a town that was built on top of mass graves called Addis Alam. There's a whole town where people were killed, and you weren't allowed to bury your dead. They would just cover them and leave them. Burying people would result in you being killed, or you being thrown into Gahanna, into these prison camps. And I think really it's more like trying to break people. So they would torture them so they could accept. And if you refused to denounce your identity, they would put you back.
Well, the full version of this interview will come to you right after this news edition.
I am in the center of the busy and bustling Mercato, once referred as the largest open market in Africa. Here is quite common to see bargaining prices and a wave of retailer and wholesale traders filling the streets along with customers. Currently, the rise of inflation is affecting the multi-sector retailer trade in Ethiopian market. ETV will closely look into the matter and bring you analysis and detailed news in this April. Watch us live on Addis News Hour of ETV Language Channel beginning 9 p.m.
Addis Ababa is the political seat of African Union and other international organizations. And ATV English will bring you fresh stories on the diplomatic arena in the month of April. Stay tuned.
Senior Security and Justice Advisor in UK and Horn of Africa, Professor Anna Fitzgerald, denounces the methodological nature of the Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch reports. Talking to Al Jazeera News, she also questioned the content and findings of the report, as war crimes and ethnic cleansing needs to have very deep and robust investigation. The Ethiopian government also questions the validity of numerous political matters of their report on the allegedly committed crimes. Jerusalem Betsaha has the details.
Last week, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch jointly released their findings on allegedly committed crimes in Welkait. The report makes allegations of ethnic cleansing, war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, the government of Ethiopia questions the validity of numerous political marchers, OHCHR, last November.
The current statement from the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International were thoroughly examining the statement, their report, and based on that, we'll act accordingly. And as we clearly stated on our statement, there are some politically motivated content there dealing with the internal matters about borders and other issues that is up to the government and the people of Ethiopia and our internal matters. We don't accept such kind of approach and interference.
Professor Anne Fitzgerald, Senior Security and Justice Advisor in UK and Horn of Africa, also shared her views on the joint reports by denouncing their methodological approach.
I guess I'm wearing my research hat, and I would ask some questions that are methodological in nature. So the researchers did not go to the area where the evidence existed in the Welkait region itself. Secondly, there were over 400, in fact, I think 427 interviews orchestrated, and that's a very good number. However, on close examination of the footnotes, it seems that the evidence that lent to the analysis was heavily weighted to the interviews undertaken by the researchers when they were on the ground in Sudan. And of course, we know that the groups in Sudan at the time not only included ethnic Tigrayan groups that were unfortunately and tragically displaced from Tigray proper, but also the Samri youth arm of the TPLF fighters, which reports suggest orchestrated the killings in Mai Kadra, deaths which the number continues to grow, but number over 1,200. So that was the first methodological question I had. There were telephone calls that were made to ethnic Amhara from the region of Welkait, but these were small in number, and we don't get a sense of number, and we don't see that reflected so much in the report.
As war crimes and ethnic cleansing needs a very deep investigation and a methodologically sound and robust investigation, Gerald also criticized the content of the report and the findings.
I think the other thing is that there's a big study by Gondar University on this very issue, which has been ongoing for over a year, and research principles command a literature review at the front end, anybody who's an expert on these issues. And it's just strange that there's no reference to that report. And the publication of this report has been unleashed 2 days before the planned publication and launch of the Gondar University report on those mass graves. I guess the last thing I'll say is that the content to me does not lend to the findings. To draw such huge conclusions that, that accuse others of war crimes and ethnic cleansing needs a very deep investigation and a methodologically sound and robust investigation. So I do feel that there's a slightly weak link between the content of the report and the findings.
The latest research by the University of Gondar revealed that over 60,000 ethnic Amharas and Welkites were murdered by the TPLF during the past 40 years in the Welkite Tagade and Talamt areas, including Maikadra.
Israeli delegation under the auspices of the Society for International Development Israel, SID Israel, is scheduled to arrive in Ethiopia today. SID Israel, which calls itself an umbrella organization that brings together over 170 Israeli private companies, government agencies, civil society organizations, academic programs and institutions, has coordinated the logistics of this mission. Members of the delegation include senior health professionals. Additional such missions are expected after a permanent coordination mechanism is established between Israel and Ethiopian hospitals. The delegation will treat patients and conduct urgent operations in various parts of the country. Ethiopia has repatriated 1,355 citizens from Saudi Arabia, where they were suffering hostile conditions. Out of the total number of people repatriated, 350 are children, while the remaining over 1,000 are women, according to Women and Social Affairs Ministry. The returnees have been admitted to makeshift facilities arranged in Addis Ababa, the ministry said, adding that efforts are underway to reinstate them in a sustainable manner. Ethiopia is returning its citizens home from Saudi Arabia. As per the plan, it's said to repatriate hundreds of thousands of undocumented nationals in the country. Ethio Telecom has signed a 3-year contract agreement with 5 companies to provide quality telecom service across the country. The contract is expected to boost the digital transformation of the country as well as telecom accessibility. Haptam Washagri has more.
Ethio Telecom has signed a 3-year contract agreement with WebSpeaks IT Solution, Viva Tech Trading, Zergao ISP, Skynet IT Solution, and Dule Business Group to provide quality telecom service across the country. Ethio Telecom is one of the pioneers public entities that have been providing telecom service for over centuries across the country. Speaking on the occasion, Ethio Telecom CEO Freyot Tamru said the agreement helps to achieve the company's target.
Our company is prioritizing its objective to provide quality telecom service to its customer, to expand infrastructure facilities as well as providing new telecom technologies. Thus, we are implementing a 3-year strategy to realize our mission. This strategic agreement is also critical to foster the target set to provide a competitive telecom service.
According to Freyot, Ethio Telecom is alertly working to realize vibrant economic growth to the nation that helps to shoulder any witnessing problems in the country. Company officials for their part said the agreement helps them to work together in the telecom sector.
As WebPrex, we have been investing in the telecom service. I think this agreement helps us to avoid network interruption problems between companies. After this agreement, we are capitalizing our partnership and recommendation activities, which are also critical.
የፓርትነርሺፕ ውላችን
We have partnership agreement with Ethio Telecom for over 3 years. This agreement will create better understanding for Ethio Telecom mid-level managers. Before this agreement, we have had unhealthy competition. This agreement will create conducive environment to boost our partnership as well as using our resources together.
Information obtained from Ethio Telecom is showing that efforts are well underway to increase the number of broadband users into 3 million across the country.
Well, next up is Forex update. Let's have a look.